Hello my friends, today I'm going to show you 6 things that ruin your poser renders. Mostly applies to DAS as well, so whichever program you prefer to use, these will apply. So here's the first one over here. Here's a scene that I've rendered, and can you see what's wrong with it? This is really common, especially when you use out-of-the-box poses. So these two guys are posed together. And excuse me, if you look closely, their eye lines don't meet, which is often the case. Now, it could be that she's kind of looking sultry over his shoulder and he's kind of looking over her shoulder. But let's just go into the scene. We'll just do face cam for him and see where he's looking. So he's looking at her, but she's looking off into space. So let's fix her eye line. So what we need to do is we need to view it from kind of in front of her face. So we'll just do a face cam for her. In fact, no, we'll do a face cam for her, but what we want is a face cam from where we want her to be looking. So just going to go over to here so we can see that this is the target where we want her eyes to be. So we're just going to go in and we're going to go into wherever the eyes are. I guess they're in morphs plus plus. Yes, here we go. And we've got eyes side to side. And we're just going to move those over so they're kind of a bit more lovingly focused on him. Oops, a bit too much there. And what we might also need to do is to go into expressions and change the eyes open and closed and the brow. But for now, we'll just leave it like that. Let's go back to M main camera and we'll just render that again. I'll be back with you in a second so you don't have to wait. And you can immediately see now that that's, you know, they're meant to be in love. Why would she be looking off over his shoulder? She's kind of looking at him, and a lot better. Now, there's something else in this scene which leads us to our second point, but I'm actually going to load another scene. There's going to be a lot of cutting and between shots here. So if you see all of these jump cuts, don't get annoyed. It was necessary to have lots of different scenes. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so here's a different scene, and I don't know if you can work out what the problem is here. The same problem was potentially evident in this previous scene, although I fixed it. But if you look down here at the hands, are the fingers exactly aligning? This is a trouble with default poses. As soon as you put, not default, off the shelf poses, as soon as you put clothes on them, the fingers usually don't line up properly. So you need to spend a bit of trouble to kind of nail down that detail. So the same here, we've got a gun, and you can see down here, if I do the right hand cam, you'll see that these fingers are a little bit messy, and the eye tends to pick up on those details once they're rendered, even if you don't see it while you're working on the scene. So very often what I'll do is I'll build a scene, move all the stuff around how I think it needs to be moved around, and then after I've done a few test renders, I'm going to go in and check out the hands and move the fingers in great detail into position. So in this case, I've deliberately just simulated that it's in a bad place, and hopefully I can just, there you go, just twist that back into place so there's nothing poking through. Now, we can have a problem here. So I've got the hand selected, and this orbit mode here means that the camera will orbit around the hand. And when you go to the back side, you'll see that the hands and fingers are still not perfectly aligned. They're pretty good actually, but I think the trigger finger's a little bit too high and stuff like that. So unfortunately, it's a case with 3D that often the something that will look great from your camera position doesn't look great from other positions. So you need to be mindful of that when you're rendering. What I'll probably do is take this finger and then do a twist on it here. And just twist that down a little bit. This is actually a default pose, but I didn't realize that that was out of position. And now that finger works well with the trigger as well. So again, when I render that, now my eye is not going to pick up any kind of weirdness with the fingers. You know, very often when we're doing the scene, you kind of look from a distance and the fingers and the hands look kind of okay. But then once you rendered it, it really doesn't look good at all. Very often, like thumb positions will be in a quite a weird position. I'm not showing you my thumb, but I will actually show you my thumb here in the camera. Often you'll get a thumb position where the thumb's kind of really sticking out to one angle or the other because it's hard to get the exact thumb positions in Poser. Let me just render this for you. I'll be back in a sec. And there you go, perfect hand position. Now you might notice here that there's some veins on the back of his hand. That's probably because it's over displacing. It was probably a Firefly material, and now that I'm in rendering with oh, let me grab hand. Now that I'm rendering with Superfly, displacement's kind of sticking out too much. Let me turn that down to 0. I could tweak that and try and get a small amount of displacement, but just to show you the difference. So I always think it's better to have no veins than too many veins. So just compare that with that. I mean, it's good. It looks like he's tense, you know, he's kind of doing that Incredible Hulk thing. But really, it's like skin pores on Poser. Very often it's overdone. Anyway, right, let's move on to the next one. I'll be back in a sec. Okay, I'm back. So what we have here is Victoria 4 in a kind of goddess pose. And you'll see here her dress doesn't conform to her sitting position. Now, it's very, very common with the old conforming clothes that they don't conform to sitting or big steps or anything really where their legs are not just dangling underneath their hips. They just couldn't turn enough. They tried to get around it. A lot of people try to get around it by adding handles to the clothes. But in this particular case, what we have here is actually a dynamic dress. So I'll just hide that and reveal the other one. So we've got Electra dress here. So it's a prop. That's a big giveaway rather than a figure. And if I just make the other one, and so what I've done here is I've taken the dress and then I'd run a cloth simulation here and then gone from a T-pose in first frame to this kind of sitting pose, and in the first frame she's well above the ground, and then I get the dress to interact with the ground as well as her body, and then as the frames continue through, oops a daisy, as the frames continue through, the dress gradually conforms with her pose, and you see here it's interacting with the floor as well, and by the time you get to the end it's kind of natural. I could possibly have even started that higher above the ground. So that's nice. You know, that's a dynamic dress. But if I go back to my clothing library, so I'll just hide that dress. So what's that called? That's it's electrodynamic. And I could instead choose dresses that just have better fitting. So for example, this Grecian outfit here is reasonably conforming. If I just do conform, I could have just dragged it to her to avoid this step. It reasonably conforms to her body anyway. And then what I could do here is just use the morph tool, and I'll just create a new morph, and I'll just call that dress. And now I've got two choices with this. I can either hide her body or I can morph the dress. So in this case, I'm going to work on the dress because that's what's selected. So I'm just going to slightly pull this dress out. So what I need to do is I need to make sure I'm on pull, and I need to make sure that the magnitude is not too high, which seems to be fine. If the magnitude's too high, it kind of distorts. And see, I'm dragging over here so the dress kind of moves around her breast and her shoulder. And now the dress is kind of fitted over the top, and down here what I can do is I can make sure that the morph is relative to the screen, so it's in and out in the Z direction, so that way. So whatever I do, it doesn't matter where the brush is, it's always morphing in and out of the screen. Or I can do or I can do surface. And what surface does is it always moves tangent to the position. See here, the brush is kind of gone on top, so now when I morph it will drag outwards or push inwards according to which of these actions I choose. So down here it's going to do the same thing. I'm just going to use a bigger brush here. Radius, okay, too big. Because I don't want it to be just a sharp little transition. I want it to have what's known as easing. So with easing, or it's like a soft brush. On the brush here, the red bit has a lot of effect. The green bit has less effect. So what it does is it gives you a nice graduated effect. And when you have a big brush to do a fairly large area here, then the effect doesn't kind of look too out of place. And I'm just dragging that hemline up. Now, the big problem with this is that if I'm going to animate, then this is going to be really problematic, because I'm going to have to do this for every single frame where the dress pokes through, or every few frames, and then I'm going to have to change the level frame by frame. So if I go to here, I've done her dress. Now I've got this new morph here, and this is the amount of morph. So I've got no morph or minus morph up to 100% morph. Well, actually, but I could limit that. So, oops, a daisy. 1. I was thinking in percentages, not. That's an annoying feature with Poser, isn't it? That it's 1 equals 100%. Why it can't just be percent, I don't know. But anyway, so there, now I've made that fit. So what I did was use a conforming dress, and even though I've got an extreme pose, I was able to use the morph tool. Now, where that can be problematic and doesn't work, see this belt here? The belt is probably, if I go into wireframe mode, hidden line. Actually, we'll do full wireframe for this. This belt quite possibly can't be separately morphed apart from the clothing it's attached to. So it's kind of bent here. But if I try and get a brush to morph this belt to smooth these out and that kind of thing, it's going to drag the underlying geometry. And that is the problem with conforming clothes. And unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do about that. It's just the nature of things. That's why dynamic clothing can be a better solution. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the next thing. I'll be back with you in a second. Okay, so I have a scene here that's set in a Japanese dojo. That's a place where you do karate, and I've got a couple of models just making some poses. But what I also have is the default poser lighting. And the problem with the default poser lighting is it has 2 spotlights, an area light, and an infinite light. And if I change to my auxiliary camera, the infinite light is coming into the scene from over here. So it's kind of like a daylight, if you like. Then we've got a spotlight coming in from the back to give you some room lighting. Then we've got a spotlight from the side and an area light from over here somewhere. And they give you excellent out-of-the-box lighting, but the problem is that out-of-the-box is very often not adequate. And this is a great example of a scene where it's not going to work. Because it's an indoors scene, the area light is not going to illuminate very much. The backlight perhaps is not going to do very much here. So what I would prefer to, and that gives me a homogeneous type of lighting, which works really nicely. But supposing I want to be outside and it's a sunny day, then I'm going to need to change the light color and the light type. So what I might want to do here, for example, is more dramatic lighting. So I've created some lighting and I've actually saved it. And my lighting is here. I'm just going to double click it. It's in my library over here. And let me just change that so that you can see the size of the library here. So is that visible? So I created some earlier and I've saved it called Mannequin. So I'm just going to double click that. Oh, in fact, I'm going to click this to replace the existing lighting. So watch the lights here and they should change for this new one. So I've done replace. I've chosen the lighting that I want just by left clicking, not double clicking. And then I do this button here, and it replaces, and you see all 4 of the previous lights have been replaced. And now what I've done is I've got a front light, a 45-degree light here, and I have a backlight. Now, what does the backlight do? The backlight gives me a rim light, and a rim light is really great for picking out the edges of the characters, and I'll show you how that looks. So when I render that, see, I've got these little glows where the light is coming in from behind. I've got this glowing from the light up here, and I've got another spot over here. I didn't want the area light, it was too soft. What I wanted was a light where I controlled the radius of the light to put the rest of the dojo in a bit more darkness and pick them out from the background. But if I didn't have a rim light, this character here, for example, see his kind of his rim here is fading into darkness. So what I could do is create a rim light over here that shines from behind, and what that does is it pulls him away from the background. It has that effect. So there are many times when you're going to, and just to show you, I'll just replace that with a Poser 13 default lights. I'm just adding those to the scene off screen, hopefully. Okay, I'm not adding them because they're not loading in. Okay, we do Poser 11 defaults. Okay, oh, there we go. Poser 13 defaults, and there you go. And you see how much flatter those lights are. See, we've lost the rim light because the backlight is behind this wall because we're inside. The infinite light, the skylight, is occluded by the building here, and you'll see if I take this dojo and I make it invisible, oops, daisy, and then render exactly the same scene. Okay, ignore the bright. In fact, why don't I turn the background color darker so as it's not blinding you? So I'll turn that down to grey, and I could do the same with floor, but it doesn't matter. Just so that you can see, okay, so the background light is now creating a rim on this character, not this character. And the lighting color there is not too bad. Compare that to the inside. See that rim light is missing there compared to that. And the outside light is illuminating the front a lot nicer compared to that. So, and here's the one that I did. See how much more dramatic that is. So the long and short of it is, very often, don't just go with the default lighting. Take the trouble to do extra lights. There's 4 types of lights, I believe: point, rim, infinite, and area. And actually an image-based light, but we don't really use those much. They're a hangover from Firefly renderer. You would be better off, if you're going to use that, to use a HDRI and buy Ken 11's HDRI control program to use those, although you can do them manually. But yeah, you get much better effect by manually taking control of the lights. Sounds obvious, but a lot of people forget to do it or just can't be bothered. Right, on to the next scene. Okay, so here's my next scene. Hopefully there's it's immediately obvious what's wrong with this, but there's actually a number of things wrong. This guy's teeth are glowing. There's far too much going on in the background. That's the main purpose of this. So the thing is that we want scene clutter to make our scenes look realistic. If we don't have enough stuff, they look very barren. If we have too much stuff, it detracts from the main image. So what we've got here is 3 mer children playing under the ocean. We've got this guy, this guy, this guy, and then we've got some sea life to anchor the fact that it's under the ocean, and octopus down here, and then we've got some plants to kind of give it a bit more life. But we've got too many plants. We also have a situation with these sea anemones. They're actually meant to be this size, but I just made them massive to make them more mysterious. But they have this really annoying kind of glow to them. They're dominating the scene in terms of color. So what we could do is, I'm just checking the recording, what we could do is manually change the color of these, but I think the preferable thing to do is just to get rid of them. So I'll just make them invisible for now. Often a good idea, rather than deleting stuff from your scene, initially make it invisible, because if you suddenly discover later on, oh, actually I really did need that to be visible. So even these bright things here, see this? Right, let me go into an auxiliary camera so I can move around to that. ruining the scene. Okay. So I actually want to select him so the camera orbits around him. So what I want is a nice clean profile. Disney always used to say it's about the silhouette. And what I've done is I've added these plants in the background and they're fine to be there. But when we look at it from the main camera, you'll see they ruin the profile of his head. So I either should get rid of them or I should move them. In this particular case, I'm just going to hide them. And I'm going to hide this pink thing here as well. So the problem with this pink thing is that it's a sea anemone again. Is that let me just make it invisible. Is that the colour is so bright that it bites with the colour of him for the eye's attention. So now if I just render that again, so I'm only on a very, very low render quality here because it takes so long to render with all this stuff in the background and all of these weird underwater lights and everything. So now you'll see, I mean, it's not a perfect scene, that this guy is chasing the tail of this guy and this little kid is riding on his back like a piggyback under the water. And then there's these bubbles and they just kind of add detail. But now everything else in the scene is not fighting for attention with this guy. His profile is nice and clean. There's not bright things here blitzing through. And I'll just show you one more super useful trick when you're in Superfly. This guy over here, you notice that his teeth are kind of glowing and they're too bright for the scene. One of the problems with Superfly, or the Cycles render engine, is that it does shininess differently. So if I go in here, I've selected that character and I'm just going to choose his teeth. Yeah, so here we've got a couple of things going on. We've got ambient occlusion node plugged in. I didn't do this, somebody else designed it. And we've got this weird dark green colour that's fighting for control of this scene. Really, really strange. So what he's done is, this is a texture called Cane. And what's done is this ambient occlusion node affects the shadow. So he's affected that for the value of the specular and the actual diffuse level. You don't need ever an ambient occlusion node if you're rendering in Superfly, because Superfly is a physically based renderer, so it generates its own ambient occlusion by accurately calculating the lighting. But he's also got down here an ambient value, and what that does is it makes the object self-illuminating. And why would you want a self-illuminating tooth? You absolutely don't. So turn that to 0 as well. So now we've got this weird color thing. So just check to see, right, so he's using a normal tooth color map here, but he's plugging it into a green diffuse color. Now, sometimes people do that when they also do an alternate diffuse. So they don't want this color fighting with this color down here. But in this case, it's the only color he's got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that, but usually what I do is I change this to white, and then whatever colours here would be visible 100%. But I know for a fact that if I change that for white, the teeth will still come out too bright and pearly, and they'll shine too bright in his mouth. So this is a really good trick. If you've got a texture that's too bright and obvious, you know, it's kind of too shiny and too glowy, just change the diffuse color to a shade of grey, not too dark, but just down a couple of notches. So I'm going to go down, what, 5 here, is that? Doesn't matter, it's only for an example. And now if I render that, hopefully his teeth are not kind of popping too much like they were before. They were kind of unrealistic, especially given that it's undersea. And as we render that, now you can see his teeth are not glowing like they were before. And let's just compare that to the previous one. So the previous one there is sort of ultra white, and now they're kind of more appropriate for the colour of his mouth. So there's still things I could do in this scene. I could move these bubbles down, I could move these, I could clean these profiles up a little bit more, move the plants even more so they're not competing. But obviously you want some scene clutter to anchor the location. So I could maybe reduce the size of this, these are not interfering with the profile because they're hidden behind the profile of this mountain, but they're not in the way of his actual silhouette here. Maybe I could clean up these behind his tail, maybe move this back a little bit so as it doesn't interfere with his arm. But I'm being and these plants I can move over a touch, these bubbles. There's lots of tiny details that go into making a scene as good as it could be, but this is much better than it was at the beginning. If I just go to the first scene, oh, that was if I go to this one and compare to the cleaned up version, lighting aside, I think you'll agree that that's a big improvement. Okay, I'm just going to load the last scene now. This one's going to be a bit more complicated. Okay, so what we have here is a lovely courtyard scene. I use this often, but the trouble is, because it's old, the resolution's really low. So I'll demonstrate that by rendering it. So it's not awful, but you see, let's go to our auxiliary camera. So as soon as you start getting into close-up territory, it really reveals its flaws. Also, this was designed for Firefly, so please excuse me. Under Firefly, this texture actually renders a lot nicer. But as soon as you rendering with Superfly, because you want maybe nice skin textures of characters and stuff like that, where you've got water and transparency for other objects in the scene, such as glasses, then you really want to be rendering in Superfly. So if I render that a bit closer, you'll see every texture has to be appropriate for the distance you're going to render in. So in games, they have dynamic textures where the amount of texture resolution depends on how far it is from the camera. Because in games, you can't afford to have, giant 8K textures for something that's a dot off in the background. Whereas in Poser, you just have a single texture and it has to work at every resolution. And sometimes what that means is you can get noise when you get far away. And at other times, you see down here how bad these floor tiles work, how badly they look. They're not convincing at all. And there's a number of different solutions to that. The best solution would be to redesign these textures from scratch. So what I would do is use something like Topaz. What's it called? Topaz Image AI, I think it's called. Let's have a look. Photo AI. And what that does is enables me to upscale textures while retaining details. So it will take this detail and it will work out how to make them look more convincing as you go up a resolution. So supposing these textures are, I don't know, 1K probably, or even 500 megs. So really quite low resolution, 500 not megs, whatever, half of 1K. They're quite low resolution textures because back in the day the file sizes really mattered, and also the amount of memory in Poser. But nowadays we could easily have 4K textures for hero objects in the scene. Basically, a hero object is any object that's going to be really close to the camera or seen in great detail. So if I took that into Photo AI, what I can do is just up-res these textures and then load them in Poser. Poser doesn't care about the size of the textures. All it cares about is the horizontal and vertical resolution of the texture. So say this texture was 640 by 480 for here, and then I increase it to 6,400 by 4,800. So I've just basically upscaled it by 10 in each orientation, 100 times resolution improvement. Poser doesn't care that you've done that, so long as you kept the horizontal and that the X and Y proportions of the image. Now, there is another way that you could deal with this. If you select the parts of this texture, so I'll select the ground, and what I might be able to do is, here are some textures that I've created. Let's see, Substance Designer, which I used to use until Adobe bought it and ruined everything. And what I'm looking for here is possibly some kind of okay, I'll have to use this. So I've got loads of stone materials that I could have imported, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to replace it with a marble texture. So, oh, granite, here we go, granite blue. And I'm just going to apply this to the floor. So I'm just going to double click. This is almost certainly not going to be the correct scale. And that's come in there. So is that too low? Well, we know the texture looks good. So what I need to just do is just go into the material room, and I'm going to need to change the scale here. So I'm going to make that a lot smaller. So change that to 0.01. Okay. Other way, I always get confused. 100 then, and 100. Too much. 10. 10. Okay. Oh no, it's I didn't need to go down. I might this time. There you go. So that's 0.1, 0.1, and I need to make sure that I do that for all the maps that are included. So bump maps, displacement maps, and everything. So I just do 0.1, 0.1, 1, 1, 1, 0.1. One. Now, the good thing is nowadays there are lots of resources online where you can get stone textures. So this might work at that resolution. I might even have had to go another quarter down, so I'll go 0.025 or something like that. And if I just give that a quick render, while I'm doing that, I'm just going to go off screen, and I'm just going to find my substance library. Right, so does that look any better than the original? That's about the same resolution. Now, the thing is, if I decrease the resolution of this original material, so I go 0.1, 0.1, so that's a factor of 10 finer to try and get rid of this granularity, obviously these tiles will get small as well, so it won't work, whereas I can infinitely size this down and it looks okay. So it's a bit more of a nice solution. But what I would like to have done, here's my library of substance stuff, and I've definitely got a stone category here. And here's all of my different stones. I might have a floor tiles category as well. I'm sure I do actually. Here we go, floors. And here, so now I could add these concrete paving blocks here, medieval planks, cobblestones. That would be a great one, wouldn't it? Just replace that with cobblestones and then just mess around. Got pavement stones, street stones. So I've got loads and loads of things that I've made in Substance Designer or downloaded. And you can go online, you can find tons of stuff that's got bump maps and normal maps that if you want to just mess. Now, unfortunately, you won't be able to do that trick here. Because of the way this is designed, if we go into the material for this area, what you'll find is that this is, I can't remember what the name for it is, but it's like a sheet where it's got the shape cutting around here and then these little portal things here and the door and everything. So if you just add a single texture, you lose all of these details here. So you'd have to manually go in and edit that in Photoshop. But with a flat surface like the floor, you can often get away with increasing the resolution of the texture. So anyway, guys, that's some 6 ways that you can improve your renders. Let me just double check that I did them all. So what did I do? I did low resolution, busy backgrounds, changing the lighting, making clothes fit better, adjusting hands and adjusting eye lines. So I hope you found that helpful, guys, and you have a fantastic week.